Hospitals are supposed to be sanctuaries, places where the fluorescent lights hum with the quiet promise of healing, and the people in scrubs are the thin line between life and death. We trust them blindly. We hand over our loved ones, our children, believing that their hands are guided by mercy, training, and a sacred oath to do no harm. But what happens when the person tasked with keeping your child alive is the very entity trying to slip them into the dark? Welcome back to another episode of True Crime on the Brain. I'm your host, Audrina. Tonight we are stepping into the sterile, echoing hallways of Ward 4 at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire, England. The year is 1991. And behind the pleasant, unassuming smile of a 22-year-old nurse named Beverly Allitt, a monster is waiting. But before we open the heavy doors to Ward 4 and dissect the clinical horror of what happened across 59 days of terror, a quick but important note. This episode deals extensively with medical abuse, severe physical harm, and the tragic loss of infants and young children. It gets deeply unsettling, emotionally heavy, and highly technical. Please take care of yourself while listening. To understand the horror of what happened on Ward 4, we have to look backward. We have to look at the girl Beverly Allitt was long before she ever wore a nurse's uniform. Because the monster that entered that hospital didn't materialize overnight. It was meticulously constructed across 2 decades of profound psychological distortion. Beverly Allitt was born on August 13, 1968, and grew up in the small, quiet village of Corby Glen. To an outsider, her upbringing was entirely unremarkable. Her father was a shop assistant, her mother a school cleaner. She was one of 4 children. There was no overt, horrific abuse in her background, no grand cinematic trauma to point to. But from a very early age, Beverly realized something about herself. She was invisible unless she was broken. By the time she reached school age, Beverly had developed an insatiable, almost frantic craving for attention and sympathy. But she didn't try to get it through good grades, sports, or making friends. She discovered that the fastest way to make the world stop and care for her was to be sick. As a young teenager, her behavior shifted from odd to alarming. Beverly became a regular in her local emergency rooms and doctor's offices. She would show up with her limbs wrapped tightly in heavy bandages, claiming she had suffered horrific falls that no one had witnessed. When the doctors would inevitably realize that there was nothing wrong and remove the cast, Beverly would go home and find a way to injure herself just enough to justify a new one. But it didn't stop at bandages. Beverly began intentionally interfering with her own body's ability to heal. She would intentionally infect minor cuts, picking at them, rubbing dirt into them, ensuring they turned into weeping, dangerous wounds just so she could watch the look of concern on a physician's face. She faked fainting spells in the middle of school hallways. She complained of phantom, agonizing abdominal pains so severe and so convincing that she actually managed to manipulate a surgeon into performing a completely unnecessary appendectomy. When that wound healed, she complained of more pain, forcing doctors to perform exploratory surgeries looking for a disease that didn't exist. Psychiatrists call this factitious disorder. You probably know it by its older, more infamous name, Munchausen syndrome. It is a severe medical condition where a person repeatedly and deliberately acts as if they have a physical or mental illness when they are not actually sick. For Beverly, the hospital wasn't a place of fear. It was her stage. The doctors and nurses were her audience, and her pain was the performance. But as Beverly entered her late teens, the thrill of being the patient began to fade. The attention wasn't enough anymore. She didn't just want to be the one receiving care. She wanted to be the one holding the power. She wanted to control the boundary between life and death. She enrolled in a nursing course at Grantham College in Lincolnshire, England. Her time there was disastrous. Peers remembered her as aggressive, manipulative, and incredibly lazy. She spent more time taking off for her own fabricated illnesses than she did studying. She failed her nursing examinations multiple times. Yet, in 1991, Grantham and Kesteven Hospital were facing a catastrophic, desperate nursing shortage. They needed warm bodies to fill shifts on the pediatric ward. And so, despite her terrible track record, her failed exams, and the quiet whispers of her classmates, Beverly Allitt was hired on a temporary short-term contract. She was assigned to Ward 4, the children's ward. And that is the exact moment her Munchausen syndrome underwent a parasitic mutation. She didn't want to be the tragic patient anymore. She wanted to be the tragic, heroic nurse fighting to save a dying child under the frantic, admiring eyes of her colleagues. And if the children in her care weren't dying, well, she would just have to make them. It began on February 21st, 1991. The victims were the most vulnerable targets imaginable. Infants and young children who were completely incapable of speaking up, admitted for routine, incredibly manageable illnesses. Her very first target was a 7-week-old baby boy named Liam Taylor. Liam had been brought to Ward 4 because of a minor chest infection. It was a standard textbook case. He was responding well to treatment, and his recovery was guaranteed. But one afternoon, Liam's exhausted parents decided to step away from his bedside for just a few minutes to grab a coffee and catch their breath. They left their infant son alone in the quiet room, alone with Nurse Allit. Within minutes of their departure, the peace of Ward 4 was shattered. Liam suffered a sudden, catastrophic respiratory collapse. His lungs just stopped expanding. Beverly Allitt was right there at the epicenter of the chaos, screaming for the resuscitation team, acting the part of the panicked, deeply caring savior. The medical staff rushed in, battled fiercely, and managed to revive the baby. But Beverly wasn't done. Just a few days later, when she was once again left unattended with Liam, the baby suffered a second, far more devastating collapse. This time, the lack of oxygen was too prolonged. The brain damage was total and irreversible. Liam's parents had to make the agonizing decision to turn off his life support. He died in their arms. The entire ward wept for the family. And who did they comfort? Beverly Allitt. Her colleagues hugged her, praised her for how hard she had fought to save little Liam. The poison of validation had filled her veins. The beast had been fed. And what followed over the next 2 months is a breathless, relentless descent into medical madness. Just 2 weeks after Liam's death, an 11-year-old boy named Timothy Hardwick was admitted to Ward 4. Timothy had cerebral palsy and had suffered a minor, non-life-threatening epileptic seizure. He was stable, conscious, and resting. But within 2 hours of being placed under the direct, unmonitored care of Allit, Timothy went into sudden cardiac arrest. His heart simply ceased to beat. The emergency resuscitation team sprinted into the room, but their efforts were useless. Timothy was gone. The cause of death was chalked up to his underlying condition. No one suspected the quiet nurse weeping in the corner. On March 3rd, 1-year-old Kaylee Desmond was brought in for a minor chest issue. While Allit was alone in the cubicle with her, Kaylee's heart monitor went into a wild, terrifying flatline. The resuscitation team was incredibly fast that day. They managed to drag Kaylee back from the edge of death. Terrified by the volatility of the ward, doctors transferred Kaylee to another hospital in Nottingham. It was there that a specialized pediatric team noticed something odd. A small, unexplained, deeply bruised puncture mark right under Kaylee's armpit. But in the chaotic, high-stress environment of emergency medicine, it was dismissed as an accidental scrape from a piece of medical equipment. It was a warning sign ignored. Then came 5-month-old Paul Crampton. Paul was admitted for a basic bronchial issue, but 3 separate times during his short stay, Paul suffered sudden, terrifying plunges into severe, symptomatic hypoglycemia, a dangerous, life-threatening drop in blood sugar that causes intense tremors, violent seizures, and deep comas. The doctors in Ward 4 were utterly, completely baffled. Paul wasn't diabetic. His tiny body shouldn't have been physically capable of producing the massive, overwhelming surges of insulin required to crash his blood sugar to near-fatal levels. Yet, like clockwork, every single time the boy was left alone with Beverly Allitt, his system bottomed out, and he would slide into the cold, unresponsive state. Let's take a step back and look at the ward from a bird's-eye view. The common denominator in every single code blue, every inexplicable respiratory failure, every sudden cardiac arrest, and every grieving parent's worst nightmare was Beverly Allitt. She was the shadow lingering over every crib, the common variable in an equation of death, the angel of death. By April, a heavy, suffocating panic had settled over Ward 4. The mortality rate had spiked exponentially, far beyond anything the hospital had ever seen in its history. But the doctors and senior nurses were operating in absolute crisis mode. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, and completely consumed by the immediate task of keeping dying children alive. They didn't have the luxury of time to sit back and look for a wolf in the fold. And that is when Beverly Allitt crossed paths with the Phillips twins. Katie and Becky Phillips were born premature, but by 2 months old, they were thriving, healthy babies. They were admitted to Ward 4 merely for routine observation regarding a minor bout of gastrointestinal distress. Because the ward was so short-staffed, Becky was placed under the primary care of Nurse Allit. That very night, Becky suffered sudden violent convulsions. Within hours, she was dead. Because she had been born prematurely, the medical examiner defaulted to a tragic but convenient explanation: SIDS, also known as sudden infant death syndrome. SIDS is the sudden, unexpected, and unexplained death of a baby under a year old that is seemingly healthy. The parents, absolutely shattered by the loss of their daughter, turned to the nurse who had been with Becky in her final moments. They found comfort in Beverly's quiet, sympathetic presence. In fact, they trusted her so completely, felt so indebted to her apparent kindness, that they asked Beverly to be the godmother of their surviving twin Katie. Think about the profound, twisted psychological horror of that realization. They handed their remaining child directly into the hands of the perpetrator who had just murdered her sister so coldly. 2 days later, Katie was brought back to the ward. Within minutes of being left alone with her new godmother, Katie collapsed. Not once, but twice. Her heart stopped beating entirely, starving her brain of oxygen for critical, agonizing minutes. The crash team managed to bring her heart back to a rhythm, but the damage was done. Katie suffered massive, irreversible hypoxic brain damage. She survived, but she was left permanently blind, partially paralyzed, and condemned to a life of 24-hour medical care. But the house of cards was about to come crashing down. The universe was running out of patience for Beverly, and her undoing came with the arrival of 15-month-old Claire Peck. Claire was admitted to Ward 4 following a standard asthma attack. It was a routine issue that the pediatric staff managed multiple times a week. Claire was placed on a ventilator to stabilize her breathing, and Nurse Allit was assigned to monitor her vitals. Within minutes of Allit taking over the room, Claire went into a sudden, violent cardiac arrest. The resuscitation team sprinted in and fought with everything they had, managing to stabilize the little girl's heart. But then, the team stepped away to document the event, leaving Nurse Allit alone with Claire a second time. Minutes later, the monitor screamed again. A second, final, fatal collapse. Claire Peck was gone. But this time, the timeline was too compressed. An asthma attack in a 15-month-old simply does not cause consecutive, unprompted cardiac arrests while hooked up to life support monitors. The hospital administration could no longer look away. The statistics had crossed the line from tragic anomaly to mathematically impossible. An intense interval investigation was launched, and when the independent clinical data came back, it revealed a sickening, stomach-churning reality. The investigators began pulling the blood samples that had been taken from the children immediately following their sudden collapses. They sent them to specialized laboratories for deep toxicology screening. What they found weren't just medical abnormalities. They found the unmistakable chemical signatures of murder. Remember 5-month-old Paul Crampton, the baby whose blood sugar kept plunging into terrifying comas? His laboratory analysis came back with insulin levels that were thousands of times higher than anything a human body could naturally produce. But the smoking gun was a specific biomarker called C-peptide. When the human pancreas naturally creates and secretes insulin into the bloodstream, it creates C-peptide as a molecular byproduct in perfectly equal 1-to-1 ratios. When the lab technicians tested Paul's blood, they found a mountain of insulin, but absolutely zero C-peptide. This was definitive, undeniable clinical proof that the insulin rushing through that infant's veins had not come from his own body. It had been forcefully injected into his bloodstream from an outside source. With this horrifying revelation, the police immediately ordered the exhumation of little Claire Peck. The toxicology report from her autopsy was equally chilling. Her tissue and blood were saturated with lethal, highly elevated levels of potassium chloride. To understand the sheer, unadulterated cruelty of using potassium chloride, you have to understand how it functions physiologically. In precise medical doses, potassium is vital for cardiac function. But in high, concentrated doses injected directly into an IV line, potassium chloride acts as a terrifying weapon. It disrupts the delicate electrical impulses that tell the heart muscles to contract. It essentially paralyzes the cardiac muscle, locking it in place and causing the heart to stop beating instantly. And the most horrific part? It causes intense, burning agony in the veins, and because it doesn't affect the brain immediately, the patient is often fully conscious, experiencing the terrifying sensation of their heart freezing solid while unable to breathe. It is the exact chemical used in modern judicial executions via lethal injection. Beverly Allitt hadn't been nursing these children. She had been using the hospital's supply room as an armory, turning routine medications into chemical weapons to wage a covert war on infants in the dark. When the police finally descended on Beverly's apartment, the remaining pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Hidden among her belongings, detectives found a stolen hospital logbook. When they opened it, they realized that several pages had been violently ripped out. Those missing pages tracked the exact nursing shifts, the exact hours, and the exact room assignments for every single time a child had collapsed or died on Ward 4. It was a desperate, amateurish attempt to erase the data trail that mathematically linked her to the timeline of the crimes. But the numbers didn't lie. In May 1993, Beverly Allitt stood trial. The courtroom was packed with the families who had trusted her, families whose lives had been permanently shattered by her hand. She was convicted of 4 counts of murder, 11 counts of attempted murder, and 11 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. The judge, recognizing the unprecedented malignancy of her actions, sentenced her to 13 concurrent life sentences. Today, Beverly Allitt resides within the high-security walls of Rampton Secure Hospital, a psychiatric facility in Nottinghamshire. Because of the nature of her crimes and her ongoing psychological diagnoses, it is widely accepted that she will spend the remainder of her natural life behind bars, never to be released back into society. But for the families of Ward 4, the legal closure brings no true peace. The sentence they serve is a lifetime of hypervigilance and grief. The betrayal of a nurse, someone who wrapped their babies in clean linen and whispered sweet words to them while secretly hiding a syringe full of poison, is a violation of human trust that time simply cannot heal. Beverly Allitt spent her entire life engineering crises because she desperately wanted the world to look at her and see a savior. Instead, history sees her for exactly what she was, a monster in a white uniform. Thank you so much for listening to this deep dive of True Crime on the Brain. If this journey into the dark corners of Ward 4 gave you chills, please take a second to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your true crime fix. Every single review helps the show grow and keeps us bringing these deep research files to light. Until next time, be sure to stay sane with True Crime on the Brain.